Welcome to today's story. This is not just about a ship. It is about dreams, courage, and tragedy. I still remember the first time I saw the Titanic. It was April 1912, and the ship stood in front of me like a dream made of steel. The sun was shining, the sky was blue, and the air smelled of the sea. People around me were smiling, laughing, and pointing at the great ship. Everyone was excited. Everyone wanted to be part of history. I was a young man then, only 23 years old. My family had saved money for a long time to buy me a ticket. We lived in England, but I wanted to travel to America to look for a better life. My father said, "Work hard, and maybe one day we will all join you." My mother gave me a small silver cross to keep in my pocket. For protection, she whispered. The Titanic was more than a ship. It was called the Ship of Dreams. People said it was the largest and safest ship ever built. They said it could never sink. I believed them. Everyone did. When I walked closer, I saw its four tall smokestacks, its shining decks, and the many windows that looked like stars on its side. The ship was taller than the buildings around the port. I felt small standing in front of it, but also proud. I was one of the lucky ones. I had a ticket. I was going to America. There were all kinds of passengers. Rich people with expensive clothes, their hats decorated with feathers and jewels. Poor families carrying only a few bags, holding their children's hands tightly. Young men like me, full of hope and fear. Sailors shouted, helping people with luggage. Horses pulled carriages full of trunks. Reporters wrote about the great ship in their newspapers. When it was time to board, I showed my ticket and walked up the gangway. My heart beat fast. Inside, the ship was even more beautiful than I imagined. The walls were shiny, the carpets soft, the lights bright. It was like stepping into a palace that floated on water. Of course, I was not in first class. My ticket was for third class, deep down in the lower part of the ship. But even there, the rooms were clean, the beds were soft, and there was warm food waiting for us. For someone like me, it felt like luxury. That evening, I walked up to the open deck. The ship was leaving Southampton. People waved goodbye from the dock. Music played. The Titanic's horn made a deep sound that shook the air. Slowly, the ship began to move. My heart filled with joy. My dream had started. The sea wind touched my face, and I looked back at the shore. I thought of my family, standing far away in our small town. I promised myself I would make them proud. As the Titanic moved forward, I noticed something. Everyone looked so happy. Children ran on the deck. Ladies talked about the fine dinners they would eat. Gentlemen smoked their cigars and spoke of business in America. Some poor families sat quietly, holding each other close, as if afraid the dream might disappear. At night, I lay in my small bed and listened to the sound of the engines. It was like a giant heartbeat, steady and strong. The ship felt alive. I closed my eyes and smiled. Nothing bad could happen here. We were on the Titanic. The next days passed in joy. I explored the ship. I saw the grand staircase, with its golden lights and shining wood. I walked past dining rooms filled with laughter and music. I even caught a glimpse of some rich passengers, though they barely noticed me. In third class, we made our own fun. People sang songs from Ireland, England, and other countries. Some played the fiddle, some clapped their hands, some danced. I met a young Irishman named Patrick. He was also going to America to find work. We became friends quickly. At night, we sat on the deck, looking at the stars, talking about the future. The Titanic is a good start to a new life, Patrick said with a grin. If the ship is this grand, America must be even greater. I laughed and agreed. At that moment, I truly believed the world was open to me. But sometimes, when the ship was quiet, I felt something strange. Standing alone on the deck, I looked at the endless ocean. It was dark, deep, and cold. The stars above were bright, but the sea below looked like black glass. I shivered. The ship felt strong, but the sea felt stronger. I quickly pushed the thought away. On the fourth night, the air grew colder. I wore my jacket as I walked with Patrick. We joked about the chill. Maybe America is freezing too, he laughed. We did not know what was waiting. We did not know that the cold was a warning. At that moment, I was only a young man on the greatest ship in the world, full of hope, full of dreams. I had no idea that soon everything would change. The night of April 14th, 1912, was colder than any night before. The air was sharp, and when I breathed, I could see little clouds of white mist leaving my mouth. The sea was very calm, almost too calm. The water looked like a dark mirror, flat and endless. The stars shone above us like silver needles. Patrick and I walked on the deck for a while, talking quietly. Most people had already gone to bed. Only a few passengers were out, wrapped in coats and scarves. We stopped by the railing, looking out into the night. The sea was beautiful, but it also felt strange. No waves, no wind, just silence. "Feels like the ocean is sleeping," Patrick whispered. His voice was low, as if he didn't want to wake it up. I laughed softly, but I also felt uneasy. Something about the silence made me nervous. Still, we returned to our cabin in third class. I climbed into my bed, pulled the blanket over me, and listened again to the heartbeat of the engines. The sound was steady, comforting. Soon, I closed my eyes. I don't know how long I slept. Maybe an hour, maybe more. Suddenly, there was a strange sound. It was not loud, but it was sharp, like metal scraping against metal. The ship shook a little, just enough to wake me. I sat up. "What was that?" I asked. Patrick rubbed his eyes. "Probably nothing," he said sleepily. But then, we both noticed something. The engine slowed down. That steady heartbeat I had heard every night, it was fading. The ship became quiet. Too quiet. Other passengers in the room woke up. Some muttered to each other, asking what had happened. A few got dressed quickly and hurried out to sea. I felt nervous, so I pulled on my coat and followed. The corridors were busy now. People came out of their cabins, looking confused. Some laughed, saying it was just a small problem. Others looked more serious. A man walked past, shaking his head. "We hit something," I heard him whisper. I hurried up the stairs with Patrick. When we reached the open deck, the cold air hit my face like knives. People were gathering, talking, looking around. Sailors moved quickly, their faces tense. I leaned over the railing and looked down. My heart froze. Huge pieces of ice were lying on the deck below. Some passengers picked up small chunks, laughing as if it were a game. But I looked past them into the sea. There, in the distance, I saw a giant dark shape, taller than the ship, floating like a mountain in the water. An iceberg. A chill went through my body, colder than the night air. We had hit it. The great Titanic, the ship that could never sink, had hit an iceberg. Still, many people did not believe it was serious. They smiled, joked, even kicked the ice around like children. But the sailors' faces told another story. They were running, shouting to each other, carrying ropes and lanterns. Patrick grabbed my arm. "Let's go back inside. Maybe it's safer." We returned to our cabin, but the atmosphere had changed. The sound of voices was everywhere. Doors opened and closed. Children cried. A few minutes later, a sailor came down the corridor. He shouted, "Put on your life jackets. Everyone must go to the deck." People began to move faster now. Some were angry, saying it was unnecessary. Others were frightened, pulling coats over their nightclothes, holding their children close. I reached under my bed, found the stiff orange life jacket, and tied it tightly around me. My hands were shaking. When we climbed back to the deck, I saw something that made my stomach turn. The front of the ship was lower than before. I could feel the tilt under my feet. The Titanic was not standing straight. She was sinking. Fear spread quickly. Women held their babies. Men shouted questions to the crew. Children cried louder. A few rich passengers complained, asking why they were being disturbed at such an hour. But most of us were silent, watching the sailors prepare the lifeboats. "Women and children first," the officers shouted. Their voices were firm, but I could hear the tension. They knew the truth. There were not enough lifeboats for everyone. I looked around at the giant ship, so proud, so strong only hours before. Now it trembled like a wounded animal. I could hear the sea rushing inside it, deep below. The sound was terrible, like death itself knocking on the walls. Patrick's face was pale. "Do you think we will be saved?" he asked. I swallowed hard. I wanted to say yes, but the words would not come. I didn't know. Nobody knew. The lifeboats began to go down into the Black Sea. Some women cried as they left their husbands behind. Children reached out their arms, calling for fathers who could not follow. Men begged to join, but the sailors held them back. Some men tried to dress as women to escape, but the officers caught them. I stood with Patrick, watching, waiting. My heart was beating so loudly I thought it would break. The air was filled with voices, shouts, sobs, prayers. Above us, the stars shone calmly, as if the heavens did not care, and still, the ship sank lower. Water was rising on the front decks. People screamed and ran from the icy waves. The band began to play music, soft and sad, trying to keep people calm. The sound floated in the cold night, almost beautiful but heartbreaking. I knew then that this was no small accident. This was death coming closer with every minute. The Titanic, the ship of dreams, was dying, and we were trapped with her. The minutes passed like hours. The great Titanic tilted more and more. I held on to the railing, trying not to fall. Around me, people cried, prayed, and shouted. The music from the band still played, but it sounded weaker now, almost lost in the noise of fear. The cold was unbearable. My fingers were stiff, my breath sharp. Every touch of the night air felt like knives cutting into my skin. I could only imagine what the water would feel like. The sailors shouted again, "Women and children only." Another lifeboat was lowered. I watched as mothers kissed their husbands quickly, their faces wet with tears, before being pulled away. Children cried for their fathers, stretching their hands as the boats went down. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to cry too, but the tears would not come. Patrick stood beside me, his jaw clenched, his eyes wide. "We'll find a way," he whispered, though his voice shook. More and more people pushed toward the lifeboats. Some tried to rush forward, but the officers raised their guns and shouted. A few shots rang into the air, not at people, but as warnings. The sound made the crowd freeze for a moment. "Stay back. Women and children first," the officers repeated. I saw a man drop to his knees, begging to be let on. He kissed the sailors' boots, but they pulled him away. Another man tried to climb into a boat secretly, but people shouted and pushed him back. The ship tilted more. I stumbled and nearly fell. The front of the ship was already deep in the water, while the back rose higher and higher. It felt like standing on a hill made of steel. People clung to anything they could: railings, benches, ropes, desperate not to slide down. Water rushed onto the lower decks now. I heard screams from below. Some passengers had been trapped in their cabins. The thought made me sick. I forced myself not to imagine it. The lifeboats filled quickly, but I knew the truth. There were not enough for us all. Many of us would never leave the ship. I looked at Patrick, and he looked back at me. No words were needed. We both understood. The band played on, a slow, sad hymn. Their faces were pale but calm. They knew too, but they played until the end. The sound was both beautiful and terrible. Suddenly, a terrible noise shook the air. It was like thunder and tearing metal together. The Titanic groaned, as if it were alive and in pain. The middle of the ship bent, twisted, and the deck beneath my feet trembled. People screamed louder. "The ship is breaking," someone shouted. I looked, and my heart stopped. The giant vessel, once so proud, was splitting apart. The lights flickered and then went out. Darkness covered us, broken only by the stars and the small lanterns on the lifeboats below. Then came silence. For one terrible second, the world seemed to hold its breath. And then, the back of the Titanic rose higher into the sky, almost straight up. People slid down the deck into the black water below. Their screams filled the night. Some hit the railings, some disappeared into the sea. Patrick grabbed my arm. "We have to jump," he shouted. I stared at the water. It was black, endless, deadly. I shook my head. No, we'll freeze. He pulled me closer, his eyes wild. If we stay, we'll be pulled down when she sinks. He was right. I knew he was right. My heart hammered. The ship tilted higher. People around us clung to the rails, crying, screaming prayers. Others leaped into the water, their bodies splashing below, their voices rising in horror as the cold swallowed them. Patrick and I climbed closer to the railing. The deck tilted so much that we had to crawl. Behind us, the Titanic groaned again, bending, breaking, dying. I whispered a quick prayer, kissed the small silver cross my mother had given me, and looked at Patrick. Ready? He asked. I nodded, though my legs shook. Together, we jumped. The air rushed past me. Then the sea hit me like a wall of knives. Pain exploded across my body. It was so cold I could not breathe. My mouth opened in a silent scream, but no sound came out. My chest burned as I fought to rise. At last, my head broke the surface. I gasped, coughing, choking. Around me, the sea was full of people, screaming, crying, calling for help. Their voices were high and desperate, cutting through the night. Some thrashed wildly, others floated silently, already gone. Patrick, I shouted, my teeth shaking. I saw him a few feet away, his face pale in the starlight. He was gasping too, fighting to stay above the waves. We swam toward each other, struggling, shivering. When we reached each other, we grabbed hands, clinging as if to life itself. The Titanic was still above us, her back pointing to the sky. I stared at her, my heart breaking. The great ship, the ship of dreams, was sinking. She groaned one last time, and then, with a roar of water and screams, she slid beneath the waves. The ocean swallowed her whole. In seconds, she was gone. Only the screams remained. We were left in the freezing black water, hundreds of us, floating, waiting, hoping. My body shook violently, every bone in me turning to ice. My fingers were numb. My breath came in sharp gasps. Hold on, Patrick whispered, his lips blue. I'm trying, I answered, though my voice was weak. We looked around for anything that could float. Pieces of wood, chairs, parts of the ship. Patrick pulled me toward a broken piece of wooden paneling. It was small, but it kept part of our bodies above water. We clung to it, our teeth chattering, our eyes wide with terror. The cries of people filled the night. Some shouted for their mothers, others prayed, others called for lifeboats that were too far away. Slowly, the voices grew fewer, weaker. Some stopped suddenly, swallowed by the sea. I will never forget that sound, the sound of hundreds of souls crying into the cold night, and then falling silent one by one. Patrick's hand grew weaker in mine. I squeezed it as hard as I could. Stay awake, I begged. Stay with me. He nodded slowly, but I could see the life slipping from his eyes. Above us, the stars still shone, bright and cold. They looked down at us, but they did not help. The world felt endless, empty, and cruel. We floated there, between life and death, waiting for something, anything, to save us. Time lost all meaning in the water. Seconds felt like hours, and hours felt like eternity. My body grew heavier with every passing moment. The cold was no longer pain, it was emptiness. My arms were stiff, my legs weak, my heart slow. The cries around us grew quieter. At first, the sea was full of voices, hundreds of them. But now, only a few remained. A child crying, a man whispering a prayer, a woman calling for her husband. Then silence. One by one, the voices were gone. I held on to the broken piece of wood, clinging with what little strength I had. Patrick's hand slipped in mine. His head dropped forward, his lips blue, his breath shallow. Patrick, I cried, shaking him. He opened his eyes for a moment, then closed them again. Stay with me, I begged. My teeth chattered so hard I could barely speak. Don't leave me. But he did not answer. His grip loosened. His body grew still. A sharp pain went through my chest. not from the cold, but from my heart breaking. My friend, my brother in this nightmare, was gone. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My throat was frozen, my voice lost. Tears burned in my eyes, but they froze before they could fall. I felt so small, so alone, in that endless sea. All around me floated silent bodies, still and pale in the starlight. The great Titanic was gone, and so were most of her passengers. Only a few of us still clung to life, scattered across the black ocean. Then, in the distance, I saw a light. A small, flickering light moving slowly across the water. My heart jumped. A lifeboat. Help! I tried to shout, but my voice was weak. I forced my frozen lungs to push out the word again. Help! Others who were still alive called too, their voices faint but desperate. The light came closer. I heard the splash of oars, the low voices of men. Is anyone there? Someone called from the boat. Yes. I tried again, coughing, choking on seawater. Here, please. The boat came nearer. I saw the faces of men leaning over the edge, holding lanterns, searching. One of them pointed. There's one. Pull him in. Strong hands grabbed my arms. Pain shot through me as they lifted me from the freezing sea. I gasped as the air hit me, my body shaking violently. They laid me in the bottom of the boat, covering me with a blanket. My teeth rattled so hard I thought they would break. I turned my head, searching. Patrick, I whispered. But he was gone. The sea had taken him, like so many others. The boat was already full of people, most of them women and children. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with shock. Some were silent, staring into nothing. Others wept softly, holding their children close. The sailors rowed hard, pulling us away from the dark sea of death. The night felt endless. I lay in the bottom of the boat, my body numb, my heart heavy. Every now and then, I heard someone sob quietly or whisper a prayer. Above us, the stars still shone, cold and distant. Finally, as dawn began to break, a shadow appeared on the horizon. A ship? It's the Carpathia, someone shouted. Hope sparked in the boat. People sat up, their eyes wide, their voices trembling with joy. We rowed toward it, slowly, painfully, but with new strength. The great ship grew larger as the sun rose, its dark shape clear against the morning sky. When we reached her side, sailors dropped ropes and ladders. One by one, we were helped up. My body was weak, but strong arms pulled me onto the deck. Warm blankets wrapped around me. A woman gave me a cup of hot tea. The heat burned my lips, but it felt like life itself returning to me. All around, survivors were gathered, shaking, crying, silent, broken. Some called for their husbands, their wives, their children, but received no answer. Others sat quietly, staring into nothing, their faces pale with shock. I found a corner and sat down, my blanket tight around me. My body still shook, but slowly the warmth returned. My heart, however, felt colder than ever. Patrick was gone. Thousands were gone. That day, the Carpathia sailed through the sea where the Titanic had sunk. The water was calm again, as if nothing had happened. But we knew. We had seen it. We had lived it. Or rather, we had survived it. I pulled out the small silver cross my mother had given me. I held it tight and whispered, "Thank you for saving me." But my voice cracked as I added, "Forgive me for leaving Patrick behind." Tears ran down my face at last. Hot tears, not frozen. They fell into the sea, mixing with the endless water. When we reached New York, crowds waited at the docks. People cheered as we arrived, but their joy turned to sorrow when they saw our faces. We were not heroes. We were survivors of tragedy. Reporters asked questions. Families searched for loved ones. The city wept with us. I walked down the gangway, my legs weak, my heart heavy. America was before me, the land of dreams. But it felt different now. The dream was broken. The Titanic had carried my hopes across the ocean, and now she lay at the bottom of it. Yet I lived. For some reason I could not understand. I had survived when so many had not. Patrick's laughter, the songs we sang in third class, the faces of mothers and children, all haunted me. But they also gave me a reason. I promised myself then I would live for them. I would work. I would build a new life. I would honor their memory. The sea had taken much, but it had left me with a duty. Even now, years later, I still dream of that night. The iceberg, the screams, the music of the band, the moment the Titanic rose to the sky and then disappeared forever, the freezing water, the silence. And yet, I also remember the stars. Bright, cold, eternal. They looked down on us that night, unchanging, untouched. And I wonder, perhaps they still shine on the place where the Titanic sleeps, a light for those lost souls beneath the sea. The world called her the ship of dreams. For me, she will always be the ship of sorrow, but also the ship that taught me the value of life, of hope, of memory. I survived the Titanic. But part of me is still there, in that cold April night, listening to the last music on the sea, waiting for the dawn.